Hello, my name is ChristinaN, and I will be introducing our next speaker for today about some of her perspectives on the effect of climate change on wildlife. Climate change is a global issue that we as humans have been feeling for many years, until only recently have we begun to see the impact that that climate change is having on both wildlife and natural systems in these coming years. While many people tend to care about the impacts that climate change will have on humans, they typically forget the impact that it can have on animals and that they will have to adjust or go extinct in response to these changing conditions. Her love of animals and realization of the shocking reality of the human-caused environmental issues pushed her to major in wildlife conservation. Unlike others in her major, her family has a background in computer science engineering, so her major is very unusual for her. She hopes that her work in wildlife, conservation, and forestry will give her a better understanding of how to approach these complex issues and make the world a better place for all living things. I'm pleased to introduce MirandaA, a sophomore here at Tech, majoring in wildlife conservation and forestry.
Thank you for that introduction. As she said, I'm MirandaA. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be talking about the effects of climate change on wildlife. Now, I'm sure we all know about global warming. We've all heard about it at least once. Carbon dioxide, among other greenhouse gases, is polluted into the air largely by human activity, and it causes the sun's rays to be trapped in the atmosphere, which in turn causes the planet to warm up. We all talk and debate the evidence for this, as well as how it affects life in general, especially for us humans. So, but how does it affect wildlife specifically? I want to switch perspectives to wildlife and discuss this point. My objectives today will be to give a brief intro about how climate change affects wildlife, and I'll identify some problems that wildlife face, such as ecosystem shifts, changes in behavior, and extinction. First, I have to identify some issues with the problem with an increase in temperature. I'll identify some issues. With increasing temperatures, we have warmer weather, obviously. We have melting ice, glaciers, and ice caps. We have rising sea levels, more and stronger heat waves, more floods and droughts, more severe storms, early and extended seasons, etc. And pretty much climate change alters ecosystems, alters habitat, and wildlife depend on their habitats. Habitat includes their access to food, water, shelter, and space to raise young. And so simply, climate change affects their homes. And this can be a serious issue. So climate change is defined, or a change in climate is defined as a change in temperature and precipitation in a particular area, defining features of Earth's biomes. And biomes are composed of ecosystems. And so thusly, climate change is a change in ecosystems, and we call this ecosystem shift. We call it a shift rather than a loss because we're not technically losing an ecosystem area. It's simply just being converted from one kind of ecosystem to another. So one thing is changing to another, like water turns into ice or vice versa. This can be very detrimental for many species it can be very detrimental to wildlife because it affects their home and their chances at survival. It can affect some more than others because some species are really dependent and they're very specific on what kind of habitat they live in. So if they kind of lose that, or becomes something else really, they lose their home and their chance at survival. So water is just melted ice, but tell that to the polar bears. Polar bears are a prime example and a poster child for the whole global climate change. I'm sure we all have heard about the polar bear problem. Many, if not all of us, I'm sure have heard about it. Polar bears rely on ice for hunting ground during their hunting seasons, and they use ice platforms in order to have ground to hunt for their food. And with increasing temperatures, their hunting season is shortened, and the ice platforms that they use are retreating. And when the ice platforms are retreating, polar bears find themselves having to swim for longer distances to get their food. And this can be very energetically expensive for polar bears, and it can cause them to be very exhausted over this. And many, since they have to swim for miles and miles, a lot of them end up drowning because of this. Now, it can be, so this is a serious problem for polar bears, but it's not just polar bears facing problems with ice melting and ecosystem shift. Many others are experiencing this as well. So, how do wildlife cope with ecosystem shifts? Well, the best way, the only real way, is for them to change themselves, to change where or how they live. So another major effect of climate change is behavioral change in wildlife. They have to change with changing tides, and they largely do this by migration. They have to move where the temperature is right or where their habitat is retreating to. They have to shift with that as they go. Aquatic species such as fish, for example, as the water gets warmer, they have to swim deeper to where the colder water is. Mountainous species have to ascend the mountain as temperatures get warmer to stay where temperature is cold enough to survive. The American pika is a good example of this. And the pika is a cousin of the rabbit, and they live in mountainous regions that rarely get above freezing temperatures, and they rely on this cold. In order to survive, they have to ascend the mountain, but the problem with this kind of migration, as well as the general migration of animals, is that they're kind of running out of mountain to climb. There's only so much mountain. And so they're running out of places to go, and they're running out of options, like many species. So you might ask me, what other adaptations, what about the other adaptations besides migration? So yeah, there's behavioral changes and certain phenotypical changes, such as, blooming sooner or changing your coat color, but those, in the long run, aren't going to necessarily prevent their extinction. It might prolong their survival. In the long term, wildlife, climate change is so huge, it's just changing coat color isn't really going to prevent them from being endangered. So what we need now is more structural, more morphological, and serious evolution. So adaptation is something we put a lot of hope in, but it can kind of be a blind hope. Now it's still kind of being researched and debated, but most scientists agree that climate change is happening much faster than species can adapt to it. In one study, they even said that a species would have to adapt 10,000 times faster than they do currently in order to keep up with climate change. And that's not exactly feasible for many species. Okay, so that's not exactly feasible for species. So they can try to alter their behavior as much as they can, but some have been a little bit more successful than others. But like I said, as I've said, some species are way more sensitive than others. So for some species, just the increase in temperature itself is enough, like that directly by itself can cause rapid and increased mortality rates. Oceanic species such as fish are a good example of this because they are exothermic mostly, and that means they regulate their temperature from outside sources. And a lot of species of fish can be very sensitive to a slight change in water temperature, so it can be very detrimental to them. But another example I'll discuss more is coral. So coral, with increasing temperatures, are caused at bleaching events. And bleaching is pretty much when they eject the algae that live on and within them in response to these warming temperatures. Most often, coral can recover, but most often than not, they end up dying from this. And this causes a lot of coral death, and it can disrupt the beautiful ecosystem that is coral reefs. But there's way more other things. It's not just temperature change itself that can affect things. There's way other effects that I haven't even touched on. Going on with the coral example, they're affected by other things too, such as ocean acidification and sea level rise. Sea level rise being a problem where coral reefs are deeper in the water because the water is rising, and thus being further from sunlight. So, the effects on wildlife with climate change can often be way more complex than they seem. So in conclusion, climate change is very vast, but it affects everything. Every living organism is affected by climate change. Wildlife are affected by ecosystem shift. They can migrate and undergo other behavioral changes. They can become endangered and extinct. Some species are often, like I've said multiple times, some species are often more sensitive than others, and that makes it all the more important to take this issue seriously and act quickly. And also, the issue is way more complex than just temperature change, just one thing. It can be way more complex. There's a lot of effects that are acting upon wildlife. And it's really important to be educated about these issues and the dangers pertaining to wildlife and climate change. So being educated of this not only helps wildlife, but it helps us too. So if you don't care about animals as much, you should at least care for yourselves, or your children, or your children's children. Every person, and I mean every single person, should do more to help the environment, whether you're doing it for yourself, or the animals, or your loved ones. So I implore you, join an organization or help out an organization, wildlife or environmental. Volunteer, take a leadership role in shaping our environment, or like me, you can make it a part of your career. Really, we make the world what we want it to be. We can make the world whatever we want. We are way more powerful than often we think we are, and we can make the world what we want it to be. And it's really just a matter of what we care about most. Thank you.